Welcome, friend. If you're new to my channel, my name is Sienna and I am a soft sculptor and fiber artist living in the Green Mountains of Vermont. Now, before I dive into this video, I do want to acknowledge that there are so many different types of artists and creators and different ways people transition into being a professional artist. And so what has worked for me may not work for another, and that's totally fine. But I do want to take this opportunity to share what I truly wish I knew before becoming a professional within my field. So I became a practicing artist around 14 years ago, and I would say that I transitioned to a more professional level around 5 years ago. And I think that being a professional artist is going to look different for a lot of creatives, but for me, I identify this shift in my career when I started selling my work to international art collectors and receiving commissions from luxury hotels and apartment complexes and doing art and design events around the country. Thinking back to my 14 years of creating and my very fresh 5 years of being a professional artist, there are 6 things I really wish I knew from the beginning to help smoothen out my journey. Number 1 is understanding the full scope of being an artist. For many artists like myself, this profession goes way beyond creating thought-provoking objects. To be successful, to reach a large audience, to open up opportunities and beyond, artists these days have to wear many, many hats. From research to digital marketing on social media, photography, editing, content creation, creating newsletters, website development, public relations, packaging and shipping, and so on. We have to learn so many different skills to make it in this industry. I do see some artists really resisting doing all of this work, and perhaps it's because they're romanticizing how past generations of artists reach success, or maybe they just really hate social media. But I think if you have the financial means to outsource all of this work so that you can focus just on the art making, that's really great, but that's not the reality for a lot of artists. And so I think it's really important to take advantage of these different avenues that are going to propel your career forward. If you're intimidated by social media, photography and editing, developing your website, and so on, my advice would be to just go for it. You're going to make mistakes, but over time you will refine your skills and really reap the benefits of these avenues. And definitely utilize platforms like YouTube to learn from others, and over time it will become second nature for you. Number 2 is avoiding the finding your style trap. So this may be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm very wary of the concept around finding your style and sticking with it. Hear me out. I do think it's really important to find types of art making that feel authentic to yourself and that allow you to execute your vision. But submitting yourself to one style is just so limiting, and over time it will likely suck the joy out of what you're creating. We are ever-growing and changing beings, and like our clothing style, taste in food, music, etc., we as human beings change, we adapt, and we experiment. It's in our nature. And I think this applies with art making as well. So keeping an open mind with what you're making, having space for experimentation, and allowing yourself the freedom to shift is really important. If you're worried about your art not visually relating or being easily identifiable, I would say that if you're following your intuition and what feels right when creating, your work is innately going to be cohesive. Number 3 is prioritizing documenting your work and keeping your art archives organized. This one really hits home for me because there's so much of my art from years past that I no longer physically have, and the photos and videos that documented them are super low quality. Now, when I was starting out as an artist, my budget was very small and phone cameras back then were really horrible quality. I did have a decent digital camera to document my art, but I just didn't prioritize any of this once the artwork was complete. And eventually things like a computer crashing would come into the mix, and I wouldn't properly save or transport my art archives. And so I'd end up pulling images just off my website when I needed them. And eventually what I was left with was super low quality images and videos, which is so unfortunate. So I would highly recommend prioritizing taking images and videos of your work. And if you're comfortable, document your process and art studio as well. These are powerful tools to show galleries, art collectors, and potential clients what you're capable of. And what's also so important is to go one step further and spend the time organizing your archives and making them easily accessible to you. Make sure you have backups in the cloud, Google Drive, external hard drives, whatever it may be, just do it. You will thank yourself later. Number 4, always plan ahead. This one may be a no-brainer for some, but for me, I really used to struggle with this. What would happen is I'd have an idea, whether it was like playing around with a technique, a color palette, a visual endpoint, and I would just jump right in and figure things out as I went. And I don't know about you, but for me as a sculptor, this was such a bad move. And time again, I would do it. You know, I'm all about being intuitive as I create and having loose boundaries with my art making. But when I'd start a project and not think about the longevity of the piece, how it would be shipped, how to simplify the install, I would really screw myself and ultimately screw my client. So I've come to learn the hard way that planning it all out is such a necessity. What that usually looks like for me is after I've identified the art piece I want to make, I need to then identify the armature and ensure the structure is going to be secure and allow the art to live on for a very, very long time. This leads me to identifying how the artwork will be installed and when and how that installation hardware will need to be attached. And then usually this is followed by identifying the shipping method and supplies and ordering all of those items far before the artwork is finished so I can reach my deadline with ease. Number 5, stop using other artists' work to inspire you. Now, don't get me wrong, I love visiting museums and art galleries, flipping through my vast collection of art books, scrolling through Pinterest, TikTok, and Instagram, and supporting artists by viewing and loving and enjoying their work. But while I think admiring and seeing other artists' work is a beautiful part of the human experience, I would suggest being very mindful and hesitant of not utilizing these outlets as a way to guide the art that you create. Because so often I think it can really persuade people, whether consciously or subconsciously, into making similar artwork and kind of losing themselves to follow a trending style, especially in the age of social media. It can cause us to let go of our authentic self to join the masses in hopes of becoming successful. Now, I've definitely been susceptible to this, and so these days when I'm in need of some good old-fashioned art inspiration, I turn to life and nature around me. This may look very different for other artists because it really depends on the type of art that you're making conceptually and visually. But I personally find that going out in nature, looking at botanical books, watching nature documentaries, and so on, I'm just left feeling way more inspired than when I was scrolling through something like Pinterest, because it also removes that comparison aspect, which can really be detrimental to an artist in their journey. Last but not least is number 6, prioritizing breaks to avoid burnout. This one is pretty simple, but for some reason, for many reasons due to societal pressure, it can be really hard to do. If you've seen my last video, I talked about how this summer I'm going to just not keep up, and I stand by this firmly. If we're constantly hustling and bustling and trying to keep up with the demands constructed by our society, we can totally lose sight of what makes us us and why we chose to be artists from the beginning. So I would say, just don't give in. Don't do it. Find a balance. I'm not saying to go MIA for weeks at a time unless that's necessary for you. What I'm proposing is that we implement small breaks throughout our days, our weeks, and our months to ensure we're getting the time we need to recharge. What this looks like for me is taking breaks from social media, spending quiet time outside, even if it's just 5 minutes, enjoying nourishing foods, taking a few days or even a few week break from art making in between projects, laying in bed and watching a movie midday while my daughter naps if I'm just feeling so drained, reading tarot and writing in my journal every morning, reading a good book before bed, and so on. There are so many little ways that we can all implement breaks and quiet time that are suited for our personal day-to-day life. These aren't grand gestures, but small breaks that can keep us going. They allow us to focus on our present and enjoy life that is physically happening around us. So, whether you're starting out as an artist or in the midst of your career, I hope this video brought you some inspiration and maybe just some time to reflect on your path and your journey and how you'd like to shape it going forward. Thank you so much for watching and for making space in your busy, beautiful life to watch this video.